My wife cheated with my best friend during our wedding prep, then conned me out of $200, $0 in a fake business deal. Now she's claiming everything, including our family home, is hers in a bitter lawsuit. Hello everyone. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Now let's begin the video. Using a throwaway for obvious reasons with certain specifics modified to preserve anonymity. I never thought I'd be the guy sitting here writing about how my wife turned out to be a damn liar and a cheat. Honestly, I'd always believed in the idea of a partnership, of loyalty and respect. We were supposed to get married in a few months, and everything seemed perfect until it was. The first signs were subtle, acting a little too secretive with her phone, brushing off my questions, and suddenly needing more space for her big plans. I just chalked it up to wedding stress. But then, things started to unravel fast. It all came crashing down one night when I accidentally stumbled across a text message on her phone. I was just looking for some photos of the wedding stuff, trying to get everything organized, and I saw a message from her best friend, Lisa. The message wasn't anything special, until I saw the words, "Can't wait to see you tonight. Things will be so much better once you're here." That was strange enough on its own, but what really hit me like a punch in the gut was the timestamp. It was sent at 11 p.m., the night I'd been working late at the office. I didn't remember her mentioning plans with Lisa, and suddenly I felt a cold sweat creeping in. I started digging deeper. I went through her emails, her social media, even her bank statements. What I found was worse than I imagined. There were messages from my best friend, Jake, talking about how much they needed to keep it quiet and making plans for their secret weekend. I couldn't believe it. My wife, my future wife, was cheating on me with my best friend. They'd been doing this behind my back for months, probably even before the wedding planning really got serious. It wasn't just the sex, it was the betrayal of trust, the way they lied so convincingly, pretending to be normal. The worst part, I also discovered she'd been laundering money through a fake business deal, conning me out of $200, $0. She convinced me to invest in some exclusive startup that was supposedly going to be the next big thing. Turns out it was just a scam. I felt like I'd been hit by a freight train. My mind kept racing, trying to process how someone I loved, trusted, and shared my life with could do this. The anger was overwhelming, but there was also a deep, aching sadness. I thought about all the times told me she loved me, how she'd say I was her forever. Turns out, forever was just a lie. I confronted her that night knowing I had to face her, knowing I'd find out the truth from her own mouth. I was furious, hurt, and confused all at once. I remember her reaction vividly, how she spun her lies, how she claimed she needed space, how she insisted it was just a mistake, that she still loved me, that it was all a misunderstanding. She looked me right in the eyes and told me I was overreacting, that I was paranoid. That's when I knew she was a master manipulator. The emotional impact hit me harder than I expected. I thought I'd be able to stay calm, to stay rational, but all I felt was this mixture of betrayal and heartbreak. How many nights did I stay up thinking about our future, imagining growing old together? And now I realized every single moment was built on a lie. I felt foolish, used, and incredibly angry. The kind of rage that makes your fists tremble and your stomach churn. I kept asking myself, how could she do this? How could she lie to my face and steal from me? And worst of all, how do I move forward from this? I kept replaying her words, her excuses, trying to find some shred of truth or remorse. But there was none, just cold, calculated deception. I knew I had to make a decision. I couldn't let her get away with it, not just the affair, but everything, my money, my trust, my life. I started planning my next move, knowing I'd have to be smart if I wanted to come out of this with some dignity left. I'll tell you, it's not easy. The pain is raw and the betrayal cuts deep. But I also knew I had to act fast, was already trying to spin the story her way, claiming I was overreacting, that I was jealous or insecure. She's always been good at lying, good at twisting things around. But I wasn't going to let her get away with it. Not this time. I had enough evidence to bring her down, and I was determined to make her pay, one way or another. I just didn't realize how complicated and messy everything would get after that. I thought I'd catch her, call her out, and then move on. But what I didn't see coming was how deep her lies went, how much she'd steal from me, and how she'd turn everything into a bitter fight that would threaten to ruin everything I had left. After that night, everything changed. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat, and every time I looked at, I saw a stranger, a liar, a thief, someone I no longer recognized. I knew I had to act fast, but I also knew I couldn't just confront her without a plan. The first thing I did was dig into her financials more thoroughly. I needed to understand exactly how much she'd taken and what she was planning to do with it. That's when I found out she transferred most of the $200 to some offshore accounts, supposedly for investment opportunities. She was too secretive to share. She'd been playing me from the start, and she thought she could get away with it all. I decided I had to confront her again, but this time I had to do it carefully. I arranged to meet her in the living room where she was acting so innocent, like she hadn't just destroyed my life. She was bitchy from the moment she saw me, throwing out comments like "you're overreacting" and "you're just jealous" when I started laying out what I'd discovered. She kept insisting she was saving us from ruin, that the affair was just a mistake, and that the money was for a new business idea she was too embarrassed to tell me about. I didn't buy any of it. I called her out, told her I knew everything. The texts, the bank transfers, the fake business deal. Her face twisted with anger, then with outright denial. She said I was paranoid, that I was trying to ruin her, that I was just jealous of her success and her freedom. That was when I saw her true colors, how she could lie so effortlessly, how she could manipulate every situation to her advantage. But I wasn't about to let her get away with it. I told her I was going to take legal action, that I had enough evidence to shut her down and recover what she'd stolen. She scoffed at me, claiming I was just trying to control her, that I was insecure and jealous. She even had the nerve to say that I was the one cheating, that she'd been forced into this affair because I was never paying enough attention. That was a lie, and I knew it. I felt a mix of fury and despair. I'd trusted her with everything, my money, my future, my heart, and she'd betrayed me in the worst ways possible. That night I realized I had to be smarter and more ruthless if I wanted to win back what was mine. Over the next few days, I started gathering more proof, consulting with lawyers and making plans. I contacted a private investigator to trace her offshore accounts, to see if I could freeze her assets before she moved them again. Meanwhile, kept playing her game, trying to gaslight me, claiming I was crazy, that I was just jealous of her success. She even accused me of cheating, which was laughable considering what I'd just uncovered. The more I looked into her stories, the more obvious her lies became. She was a master at manipulation, but I was learning her tricks and using them against her. I knew that if I wanted to win, I'd have to stay calm, stay focused, and be prepared for whatever she threw at me next. One thing that really hit me hard was how she claimed everything. Our house, our savings, even our future, was hers because she was the breadwinner, or so she said. She argued that I had no right to control her, that I was just some jealous husband trying to hold her back. She even tried to spin her affair as her right to explore, insisting she deserved happiness and freedom. That was the moment I realized how deep her narcissism ran. She saw everything through her own lens. Everything was hers, and I was just a pawn in her game. I knew I couldn't let her keep this up. I had to protect myself, my money, and my dignity. I started planning a legal counterattack, knowing her next move would be to try and manipulate the court, to claim I was the one at fault. I had to be ready for that. The emotional toll was brutal. Every day felt like walking a tightrope. One wrong step and everything could blow up in my face. I felt betrayed, humiliated, and furious all at once. I kept asking myself how I'd let her get so far, how I'd been so blind to her lies. But I also knew I couldn't keep dwelling on the past. I had to act. I had to fight for what was rightfully mine, and for the truth. I couldn't let her rewrite history and walk away with everything she'd stolen. I started to feel a strange sense of clarity, like I was finally waking up from a nightmare I'd been in for too long. I don't know what the future holds now, but I do know I won't let her get away with this. I've learned that trust is fragile, and some people will lie, cheat, and manipulate to get what they want. If there's one thing I want others to take away from this, it's to always pay attention to the signs, no matter how small, and never ignore your gut. Because when someone shows you who they really are, you better believe them the first time. After I started pulling together all the evidence and lining up my legal options, true colors came out even more. She began to get nasty, throwing accusations and trying to turn everyone against me. She'd call friends, family, anyone who would listen, claiming I was the one cheating, that I was paranoid and jealous. She insisted she was the victim, that I was trying to ruin her reputation and take away her hard-earned money. It was all a big lie. I knew her tricks now. She'd always been good at gaslighting, twisting facts, and making herself look innocent. But I wasn't buying it anymore. One day she showed up at the house unexpectedly, trying to intimidate me. Her face was tight, her eyes cold. She told me I was ruining everything and that I had no right to control her. She said she'd take everything I had if I tried to stop her. She even started claiming that the house, all our assets, and even our future kids belonged to her because she was the one who kept everything afloat. I couldn't believe her audacity. She was trying to rewrite the entire story, like I was the villain when she was the one who'd been lying, cheating, and stealing from the beginning. It was honestly surreal. I stayed calm, though. I told her I had evidence and witnesses, and that I was going to do whatever it took to get my money back and protect myself. That's when she dropped the bombshell that she was planning to sue me for half of everything, including the house, the savings, and even some fake business she claimed I owed her. She was trying to turn the tables, and I knew I couldn't let her. I'd already seen what she was capable of, how she'd con me out of hundreds of thousands and then lie her way out of it. I realized I had to get ahead of her legal moves before she completely destroyed what was left of my life. Meanwhile, I also found out that she'd been secretly working with Jake, the best friend I trusted most, to set up the fake business deal. They cooked up the whole scam, knowing I'd be the one to bankroll it. She promised me it was going to be the next big thing, that I'd be set for life. Instead, they took my money, left me holding the bag, and then went off to live their lives. It was infuriating to know I'd been so blind for so long. I'd always believed in her, in us, in our future. Now I saw her for what she really was, a manipulative, selfish woman who'd do anything for money and power. I started to get serious about my next steps. I contacted a top lawyer who specialized in financial fraud and divorce cases. We drafted a plan to freeze her offshore accounts, seize assets, and file for full custody of the situation. I knew she'd fight dirty, so I prepared myself for a war. I also hired a private investigator to dig into her recent financial transactions, to see if she'd moved any of the money or assets. The more I uncovered, the clearer it became that she was planning to disappear with everything. I couldn't let that happen. I had to be relentless. The emotional toll was intense. I felt like I was fighting not just for money, but for my dignity and sanity. I kept asking myself how I'd let it get to this point, how I'd let her manipulate me, how I'd been so naive. I'd always thought we were building a life together, and now I was fighting to keep my life from falling apart. I'd been betrayed by someone I loved, someone I thought was my partner. The shock and anger were overwhelming, but I knew I had to stay strong. I couldn't let her see me break. I also started to realize how much her lies had affected me. Every moment I spent trusting her, every plan we made, was a lie she'd used to manipulate me. It was a hard pill to swallow, but I also learned an important lesson. Never ignore the signs of betrayal, no matter how convincing someone seems. Trust is fragile, and once broken, it's nearly impossible to repair. I had to pick up the pieces of my life and rebuild from scratch, knowing that I'd never let her do this to me. Again, now I'm at a crossroads. I have enough evidence to go to court to fight for my money, my house, and my future, but part of me wonders if I should just cut my losses and walk away. The pain of betrayal runs deep, and I don't know if I can ever truly trust again. Still, I know one thing for sure: I won't be the victim forever. I'll fight for what's rightfully mine, and I'll learn from this nightmare. Because if there's anything I've realized, it's that some people will lie, cheat, and steal with no remorse. And you have to be prepared to stand up and fight back, no matter how hard it gets. By the time I had all my evidence in order and my lawyer on speed dial, his behavior grew even more erratic. She sensed I was closing in, and instead of backing down, she doubled down on her lies. She started showing up at the house unannounced, throwing tantrums, screaming that I was ruining her life and that I'd never get a penny of what she claimed was hers. She told everyone, including her family and mutual friends, that I was the one cheating and that I'd been abusive just to turn the story against me. It was like watching a master manipulator in action, and honestly, it made my stomach turn. One day, she stormed into the house, furious and crying at the same time. She claimed I'd been harassing her and accused me of trying to ruin her reputation. She said she was going to sue me for defamation and emotional distress, trying to make herself the victim once again. The thing is, she didn't realize I had already hired a team of legal professionals who knew exactly how to counter her lies. My lawyer had warned me she'd try to spin the story, but I was ready for her. I handed her a folder with all the evidence, screenshots, bank statements, witness statements, and told her it was over, that I was filing for a divorce and seeking full custody of the financial assets. Her reaction was pure venom. She looked at the evidence, then at me, and sneered, "You think you're so smart, don't you? But I've got friends in high places. I'll take everything from you, your house, your money, your dignity. You're just a jealous, insecure man who's too stupid to see how much I've done for us." It was at that moment I realized how deeply narcissistic she was, how she saw everything as her entitlement. She truly believed she was the victim, and her lies were so ingrained that she couldn't see the damage she'd caused. Meanwhile, I kept pushing forward, gathering more proof of her bank fraud, her secret meetings with Jake, and her plans to disappear with the money. I also found out she'd been working with some shady lawyers to try and claim the house, arguing that she'd contributed more financially. That was a lie. I'd paid off the mortgage, handled all the bills, and built most of our assets, but she was pretending to be the victim, claiming I was trying to steal her rights. I knew I had to tread carefully. The last thing I wanted was a legal war that would destroy everything I'd worked for. The emotional toll was brutal. Every day I felt like I was walking through a minefield, waiting for her next move. I felt betrayed, humiliated, and deeply hurt. I kept asking myself how I'd missed all the warning signs. How could I have been so blind? I kept replaying all the good times, all the promises she'd made, and then I'd remember the lies, the cheating, the money she'd stolen. It was a crushing blow, but I also knew I had to stay strong. If I broke down now, I'd lose everything. So I kept my head down, focused on my legal strategy, and tried to keep a clear mind amid the chaos. I also started to realize how much her lies had affected me beyond just the legal stuff. I'd trusted her with my heart, my money, my future. And she'd used that trust to manipulate me, to take everything she could. It was a bitter lesson in how dangerous it is to ignore the warning signs of someone who's only out for themselves. I learned that sometimes love isn't enough. Sometimes you have to protect yourself from the people closest to you, especially when they reveal their true nature. I can't say I've fully moved on emotionally, but I've definitely learned to be more cautious. And honestly, I'm exhausted. The constant fighting, the stress of court dates, the endless lies, it's drained me more than I ever thought possible. But I also know, can't give up, not yet. I still have a chance to win this fight, to get my money back, and to reclaim whatever dignity I have left. I refuse to let her manipulate me into feeling guilty or ashamed. I know what she is now, and I won't let her win. Whatever happens next, I'll be ready. I've learned that sometimes the most important thing is to stand your ground, even when the whole world seems to be against you. Because in the end, the truth will come out, no matter how much someone tries to hide it. The days turned into weeks, and the legal battle intensified. Antics only got more desperate. She started filing her own claims, trying to argue that I'd been abusive, that I'd been controlling, that I'd manipulated her into the affair. She even hired her own lawyer, who tried to spin her version of events, claiming she was the innocent victim of my abuse and greed. It was all so predictable. She had no shame in twisting facts, in lying to everyone who would listen. Meanwhile, I stayed quiet, letting my lawyer handle the court filings, gathering every piece of evidence I had to prove her deception. One day she showed up at the courthouse, screaming and trying to block the proceedings. She told the judge I was dangerous, that I'd been stalking her, that I'd been trying to ruin her reputation. The judge listened patiently, but I could see the skepticism in her eyes. I handed over the documents, the proof of the offshore accounts, the fake business deal, and the text messages from Jake. The judge reviewed everything, then looked at and asked her straightforward questions. His face was flushed, her lies unraveling under the weight of truth. That moment was a turning point. The judge ordered an immediate freeze on assets, including the offshore accounts, and set a hearing to determine the ownership of the house and the money. The court also appointed a financial investigator to audit everything she'd been hiding. I felt a strange mixture of relief and exhaustion. I knew this was just the beginning of a long fight, but I also knew I was finally getting some justice. For the first time in months, I felt a glimmer of hope that I could come out of this stronger, but wasn't done yet. She started to threaten me more openly, claiming she'd ruin me if I went through with the court case. She called me a heartless bastard, accused me of trying to steal her dreams, and insisted she'd take everything I had. She even tried to turn our mutual friends against me, spreading rumors about how I'd been abusive and controlling. I knew she was trying to isolate me, to weaken my resolve before the final hearing, but I refused to be manipulated anymore. I had my evidence, my lawyer, and my own sense of justice. I was determined to see this through. Emotionally, I was drained. Every day felt like a war, and I was constantly on edge, waiting for her next move. I kept asking myself how I'd let it get this far, how I'd trusted someone so deeply, only to be betrayed so completely. It's a bitter pill to swallow, realizing that the person you loved and planned to spend your life with was secretly working against you the entire time. I was angry at myself for not seeing the signs earlier, but mostly, I was angry at her for destroying everything we'd built. Through all this, I learned a lot about myself. I learned that trust is fragile and that some people will lie and cheat without remorse. I learned that you have to be your own advocate, especially when someone you love turns out to be your worst enemy. And I learned that sometimes the only way to protect yourself is to fight back with everything you've got. Because if you don't stand up for yourself, no one else will. I've come to accept that I might never get back what I lost, my money, my trust, or my sense of security, but I refuse to let her win entirely. I'll fight until the very end, and I'll come out the other side knowing I did everything I could. That's the only way I can sleep at night now, knowing I didn't let her take everything without a fight. The court date finally arrived after months of legal battles, lies, and manipulations. I sat there, feeling like I'd been through hell and back, watching as lawyer tried every trick in the book to discredit me and claim she was the innocent victim. But I had the evidence, everything from bank statements to text messages, witness testimonies, and expert reports. When the judge finally looked at all the facts, it was clear who was telling the truth. Lies unraveled in front of everyone, and her attempts to manipulate the system failed miserably. The judge ordered her to return the stolen money and froze her offshore accounts. She was also her claim to the house, which was awarded to me after I proved I paid most of the mortgage and had the better legal claim. The court ruled that her claims of contributing equally were baseless, given the evidence of her deceit and the fake business deal she'd concocted to steal from me. It was a hard-fought victory, but one I knew I deserved after everything she'd put me through. I felt relief, but also a strange sense of emptiness, like I'd lost a part of myself to this nightmare. In the aftermath, I decided to move forward alone. I sold the house, cut ties with the people who believed her lies, and started rebuilding my life from scratch. It wasn't easy, trust had been shattered and the scars ran deep. But I also learned to be cautious, to trust my instincts, and to value myself more than ever. I realized that sometimes the biggest betrayal comes from those you love most, and that the only way to survive is to stand tall and fight back. Unsurprisingly, didn't take the defeat well. She tried to appeal, to manipulate her way out of it, but her efforts were futile. Her reputation took a hit and she lost everything she'd stolen. As for me, I finally felt free from the lies, the deception, and the betrayal. I learned a hard lesson about trust, greed, and the importance of being vigilant. I'll never forget what happened, but I also know I'm stronger for having survived it. Looking back, I realize I was naive to believe love and loyalty were enough. They aren't. People will lie, cheat, and con their way to what they want if given the chance. The key is to protect yourself, to listen to your gut, and to never ignore the warning signs. If I could give anyone advice from my experience, it's this: trust is a fragile thing. When it's broken, it's almost impossible to fix. But you can survive, you can rebuild, and you can come out stronger if you're willing to fight for it. I did, and I'm finally at peace, knowing I took back control of my life. That's all anyone can really ask for after a betrayal like this.